Hi, my name is Jennifer Boss, and I will be presenting today on the presentation topic of heterogeneous grouping versus homogeneous grouping. My purpose behind choosing this topic was because I wanted to learn more about the two types of grouping and figure out which one is best to promote academic achievement in my classroom and also high student self-esteem and morals in my classroom. I will be doing a for my presentation today, and I will go ahead and start. So, heterogeneous grouping versus homogeneous grouping. What does the research really show? My first topic that I focused on were the effects on student achievement. For heterogeneous grouping, the general research data showed that lower ability students tend to have higher academic achievement when using heterogeneous grouping. They're able to feed off of their counterparts, the other students in the classroom that may be having higher abilities. Whereas the average ability students and the higher ability students tend to be at a disadvantage. Higher ability students deserve to get more differentiation and enrichment from homogeneous grouping. So heterogeneous grouping tends to take that option away. Some more pros are that heterogeneous grouping allows for more collaborative learning and offers the opportunity for higher expectations for all abilities. Whereas in the cons, it's less equitable for higher ability students and offers less opportunities for enrichment for higher ability students. For homogeneous grouping, some of the pros are that it allows for academic growth for all students. So although the lower ability students may not show as much academic growth as they do in a heterogeneous group, they still show growth. Also, it shows higher academic gains for average ability students versus heterogeneous grouping. So average ability students will show growth in both types of grouping, but the gains tend to be more in a homogeneous group. It's also more equitable for higher ability students in that they are allowed to be enriched at the level that they're learning at, and it also allows for more collaborative learning experience based on students' ability levels. Some of the cons are that there is less equitable for lower ability students in the general sense that it can cause teachers to have lower expectations based on the students' abilities as opposed to expecting them to achieve at the same level as all of the other students. Showcased a couple of graphs from some of the research that I found, and if you notice here, the blue lines show post-test scores for heterogeneous class, the purple lines show post-test scores for homogeneous class, and if you'll notice that the homogeneous class scores in the high, average, and low grouping tend to be higher than in the in the heterogeneous class. So homogeneous classes tend to score higher academically. This is the graphing of that. Another research project showed that similarly, high ability students tend to show growth in both and seem to be high achieving no matter what, whereas average abilities tend to show higher achievement in homogeneous, and then here's the lower ability tend to show higher achievement in the heterogeneous side of the graph. Okay, my next topic was the effects on student self-esteem. As we all know, heterogeneous grouping allows for more collaborative working, which allows the students to be able to showcase their own strengths in their collaboration as opposed to having to all be doing the same thing. Someone who's good at writing could be doing the writing. Someone who's good at speaking could be doing the speaking part of it. And this, in turn, allows for higher academic self-confidence for all ability groupings as compared to homogeneous grouping. It also allows for higher motivation for lower ability students. They're more motivated to work in this setting because they're allowed to showcase what they're good at as opposed to being stuck in that bottom group. It does sometimes have lower motivation though for higher and average ability students, as they aren't allowed to move past and be enriched in ways that they would in a homogeneous group. For homogeneous groups, similar as I said, lower self-esteem in gifted students, lower motivation in low ability students, higher motivation in both average and high ability students. So those higher students are going to be more highly motivated, and the lower students are going to be a little lower motivated, less motivation. And this graph shows motivation here. You'll notice the low ability students in the homogeneous group tend to have less motivation to achieve, whereas the heterogeneous groups tend to have higher motivation, and the average also tend to have higher motivation in the homogeneous side, whereas it is opposite in the other side. Next category is social interaction. In the homogeneous grouping, it is known that you can do, homogeneous grouping can be done within one classroom or between many classrooms. So you can share students among your grade level, or just differentiate in your own classroom. You can do it in small groups. Students can connect on their similar abilities, and it can cause students to be divided up by academic status and race. So one social interaction cue that can be kind of a downfall of homogeneous grouping is the way that our students achieve is generally reflected in can generally be reflected in their race and or socioeconomic status, causing us, when we group, to tend to force them back into those groupings. In heterogeneous grouping, it allows for better collaboration between students, allows for more opportunities for students to use their social strengths in a collaborative fashion, and can be done in whole groups or in small mixed ability groups. So just like homogeneous can be done in small groups, so can heterogeneous be done in small groups, such as giving each student a task at hand. Some of my final thoughts, things that I pulled from the article that I found to be important, were that when choosing what type of grouping to use, it's important that you choose a purpose for your activity. What is the purpose? If it's an activity that requires the students to work together, it's better to showcase different abilities and have students showcase their strengths by giving them each jobs and tasks. Whereas if it were a reading task and you want the students to all be reading an activity at the same level, it's best to do ability grouping or homogeneous. According to research, students generally tend to prefer homogeneous over heterogeneous grouping. So knowing that achievement is higher for homogeneous and students generally tend to prefer that type of grouping kind of leads me towards choosing that type of grouping for my classroom. Knowing that heterogeneous grouping improves social self-confidence and motivates students of the lower achievement tells me it's sometimes maybe helpful to incorporate both of those into my teaching. And this concludes my presentation of heterogeneous grouping versus homogeneous grouping.